Some time ago we've built this main menu in Godot. Today we'll focus on the options section. Our settings menu will have a total of 3 options: music volume, full screen or windowed mode switch, and scaling dropdown. You will also learn how to build all of that and how to handle input from sliders, from toggles and from dropdowns. But before we start, a quick message. We'll be running the second edition of Coco GameJam. It will happen in around a month on May 24th. First edition was a great success, so be sure to join and experience how it is to create a game in just a week with fellow game developers. Okay, so we are now back to Godot and let's start showing a separate panel when option button is being clicked. So first I will create a new node called panel, and this panel will be covering our main menu buttons, and the idea is that it will be shown after we click on options button. Let's anchor it to the center, so no matter what's the resolution, it will always stay in the center. And let's add a child label, which will just be placed here on the top. Let's maybe also anchor it like that. And its text will be simply options. I will also modify its text size, so let's try with 20 or 32, let's stay with that. Okay, and finally I will move this panel slightly down like that. So let's now implement a logic that will open this panel when we click on options and hide the buttons below it. So let's go to our main menu script. If you don't have it just yet, just create a new script on the root object main menu. Here I already have some signals that are being triggered whenever we click on start, settings, exit. In this case we want to modify on settings pressed signal. First, let's get references to our container and panel. I will maybe rename them to main buttons and this panel to options. Then, to reference them in the script, the simplest way is to start dragging them, and just before letting go the mouse, hold Ctrl or Command key on your keyboard. That will create this nice on-ready reference, so I will do the same for main buttons and for options. And as you might have guessed, we would like to hide main buttons when we open settings and display options. So I will type main buttons that visible equals false and options that visible equals true. To make sure that main buttons and options will be properly displayed at the start of the game, which I mean that the main buttons will be visible and options will be hidden by default, let's add a ready function ready. And as a reminder, this is a function similar to the start method in Unity. It is basically triggered at the start of the game. I want to copy those 2 lines of code and reverse them so that main buttons will be visible by default and options will be hidden. I think that's it. Let's save it and press play, check out how it works. Okay, so as you can see, by default, the options menu is being hidden, and when I click on options, we now see this nice options panel. Okay, let's now quickly add a similar logic for a back button that will allow us to go back to the main menu. I will copy this button and paste it here. I will need to resize it a bit, maybe place it right here. It will be called obviously back. It will be a parent of options, no need to parent it as a label, and I will call it back. Let's now connect it to our main menu script. Go to signals here in the top right hand side, and instead of having this pressed on exit pressed, I will remove it because it got copied from the exit button. I will create new pressed signal and connect it to the main menu on back options pressed. Okay, connected. Here it is on back options pressed, and here, as you might imagine, we can just trigger the ready function like that, which makes main buttons visible and options hidden. Final test, and here is our nice flow. We can go to options and go back. Okay, I think it's time to start with the audio. As you can see, I already added this audio stream player node with Creative Commons music that can be played. You can download it in the description. I can play it just for a preview. I will enable autoplay for it, but the problem is that now when I start the game, it should start playing. That's intended, of course. But there is no way to change the volume or even disable this music. So let's work on that. I will hide these main buttons for now. Let's focus on options. And here I will create a new node called slider. We can choose between horizontal one and vertical. I will go with horizontal slider. Let's change its size like that. Then I will modify some styles. Let's change slider to new style box line. It should be white, let's say, with thickness of 8 or maybe 6, a bit less. Then I will do similarly for grabber area. So this is the one that is selected. Let's say that current value is 50. For grabber area, I will do some other color like blue, for example, with also thickness of 6, a bit nicer blue. Okay, and I will copy this style and paste it into the grabber area hovered paste. So now we have this nice slider that already works, actually, is interactive with the mouse, and we can simply click on it and drag it around. Let's also add some functionality to make it work. So in our game we might have multiple sounds, but we should have some kind of way to separate them. So for example, in our game we might want to separate music from the sound effects. Thanks to that separation, we can implement multiple sliders that will allow us to control either music or sound effects. So for example, player would like to disable music but would like to have sound effects still present in our game. In Godot it's actually very easy to do so. Here on the bottom, just click audio, and here you have default master bass. If you haven't configured anything here, this is the master volume. Every audio that is output from the game is dependent on this volume, effects, and so on, but we can create additional buses. So click here, add bus, and let's name this bus music, and I will do the same for sound effects. We don't need to modify anything here, but when we go to our audio stream player, you might see that there is bus option, and instead of master, I will select music. Of course, when you will have any sound effects, there you should assign a different bus. Okay, I will now rename it to audio control and create a new script called audio control. Create. Here, let's first connect our slider. Go to the scene, audio control, go to the signals, and here you have this range changed and value changed. The first one is triggered whenever slider is anyhow changed, but the second one is the one we are interested in because it also gives us immediately the new value. So let's double click on that, connect it with audio control, and just for testing, let's print out our new value. Now when you will look at the console, you can see that when we change the slider, the new value is immediately being sent to our onValueChanged function. Now let's change this audio bus settings. First, we need to pass in which audio bus we would like to change. So here at the top, I will type export var audio bus name of a type of a string. As a reminder, when you create export variable and save it, now you can see that in our audio control inspector, you have this audio bus name variable exposed. So for each slider, you can have this value configured differently. In this case, I will call it music. Make sure it's the same name you configured here because it's case sensitive, it needs to match up. Okay, back to the script. In onValueChanged, we can make use of a function called audio server set bus volume dB. It inputs two values, index and value in decibels. The first one actually is integer. So how to get this integer? We have string so far. We need to use a special function that returns bus ID based on its name. So I will create a new function ready and here type variable audio bus ID equals audio server dot get bus index. Here we simply need to pass in the name of this bus. As you can see, we already have suggestions of all existing buses, but in this case I would like to pass in this audio bus name variable, which we'll define in the inspector. Because we'll be using this variable in onValueChanged, let's make it global for this script like that, and here we'll simply assign it. Then here in audioserver.setBusVolumeDB, we can pass in this audio bus ID, and then we also need to pass in volume in decibels, so I will pass in value. This value should be between 0 to -80. So let's do that for our slider. The minimum value will be -80 and maximum value will be 0. The default value should be 0, so maximum, and then player might be able to decrease it. Okay, that should work. Make sure that everything is saved and press play. Okay, I will click options, start decreasing this slider, and as you can see, there is something wrong with this slider. Basically, at this point, the volume is non-existent and there is still half of the slider left. Why is that? Well, that is because volume level is not linear. You can actually preview it here in the audio panel. Notice those ticks on the right and how the value changes when I drag this slider. Basically, our volume perception is not linear. This is a small chart that represents that. So how to fix that? Well, the fix is actually very easy. There is a built-in function that helps us with that. To convert linear value to decibels, we can type var dB equals linear to dB and pass in value. And then I will replace value with dB here. When we check the documentation, you can see that this value should be in range from 0 to 1. So on our scene for our audio control, I will change minimum value to 0 and maximum value to 1 with step of maybe 0.05 so that it will have a total of 20 volume steps. And the default value should be 1, so maximum. Okay, and now let's test it out. Now, as you can see, this slider makes way more sense for our game. Okay, great. Next up, let's work on toggling between windowed mode and full screen. If you didn't know, you can already control this value, the default value at the start of the game. To do that, go to Project, Project Settings, then go to Display, Window. Here we have Mode Windowed, and you can change that to full screen. That way, when you start the game will start in the full screen mode. But here you can see a different problem, that our game in the full screen mode is like a bit too small. Those buttons stayed the same size even though the screen is stretched to the full size of the screen. To fix that, in the same project settings menu, display window, here we have stretch mode. By default it's disabled, which means that every object you define on the scene will stay with the exactly same size. To change that so that the objects will be stretched, go to mode and set it to canvas items. Now when you run your game in full screen mode again, you can see that our buttons now cover much larger portion of the screen. Basically they are in the same size as defined in the window. Now let's control that in our settings. Inside of the options, I will create a new child node which will be of a type CheckButton. It's very small, so let's resize it a bit. We can also very easily add a label, so I will type full screen. Unfortunately, styling of this component is quite tedious because this checkbox is an image and we can't control its color very easily. I will leave it for now. Let me know if you would be interested in a separate tutorial on how to create UI themes in Godot. Let's rename it to full screen control, and as always I will also attach a script to it. We would like to add a signal. It will be this one, toggled. Of course, let's connect it with our newly created script. And here all we need to do is to check if toggled on equals true, if so something, otherwise something. Okay, so what we need to do is to call display server that window set mode, and here we need to select one of those different modes. So in this case, when we toggle this full screen toggle, we want to enter full screen mode. Otherwise, we will go with window mode windowed. Okay, that should be it actually. Let's play it and test it out. Oops, it opened in the full screen. I will go back to project settings and disable default full screen behavior. So let's stay in windowed. And now our game starts in windowed mode. I go to options, toggle full screen, and now the game is in full screen. So now, regarding the last setting, I've been thinking what will be the best third setting to add here. At first I thought it could be resolutions dropdown, but apparently Godot is very against classic resolution switcher. You can read about it here, link in the description. While all of this makes sense because it's good to run game in the native resolution, it's way better experience for the players, it is still a good idea to offer players some way to decrease rendering quality if needed. This is why I will switch to the starter kit basic project from Kenny. I'm showing you this project because I want to quickly give you an idea of how the special setting to change 3D rendering scale works. So go to project settings, then we need to enter advanced settings, and then in rendering you have scaling 3D. I will do it side by side and you will be able to see that once I modify the scale, the rendering becomes very blurry. This is a way to quickly change the scale of rendering while keeping the native resolution of the game. Of course, there is way more to it. It was just a quick demonstration. You can read about different modes and how to change them. So I have quickly modified our scene to also have 3D models on it so that we could demo those scaling features. I will go back to 2D tab, and here in our options, I will create a new child node, which will be option button. This is basically a dropdown, which we can again scale and move it right here. To define its options, here in the inspector, go to items and add element. It could be a slider, but I decided to just create a few predefined options for our dropdown. So the first one will be 100%, which will be the value of 1, and then 75%, 50%, and the lowest quality of 25. You can, of course, also change it to like ultra, high, medium, low, or something more readable to the player. This is just a quick demonstration of how you can implement that. Then after you define the items, it is also worth to set, one second, where is it? What is the default selected item? So in our case, it should be 0, so the first element. I again won't be styling this dropdown today, but before implementing the logic, let's quickly preview how it works. So options, and here we have a nice dropdown of all the options we have defined. And now let's code it. So once again, I will change its name to scale control and add a new script to it. Then we also need to add a new signal, which will be on item selected. And here, to make sure that it works, I will print out the index, or actually we will do one step further. So var options, and here I will create an array of all the options to select from. So the first one will be the value of 1, so 100%, then 0, 75, half, and 0, 25. Then I will print out options of the index of index variable. Okay, let's try it out. Okay, look at the console, and now when I switch to 75%, we have 0.75 printed out. Let's combine it with the logic, and it will be very easy. So I will first create a new variable called value, which will be this, which we defined a second ago, and we'll both print out this value and then type get tree dot root dot scaling 3D scale, and then assign it to our value. Finally, before testing it out, I think it's a good idea to tie it up a bit. So I will select those 3 control nodes and right click on it and reparent to new node, which will be a box container. We have horizontal one and vertical one. Let's go with vertical box container. As you can see, box container automatically assigns all the children in it so that they will be nicely arranged. I will move it to the center like that. Actually, we can once again use anchor preset, then resize it a bit. To change spacing between items, go to inspector, theme overrides, separation, and introduce a bit of separation. And lastly, as you can see, our volume and quality switchers do not have any labels, so let's also fix that. I will create new node, which will be horizontal box container. I will make it as a parent of our audio control, and inside of it, I will also add new label. This label will say simply music volume. Okay, and as you can see, there is something wrong going on with the volume. It does not want to stretch automatically. To fix that, go to the audio control and then here layout, container sizing, and next to the horizontal, click expand. Now, as a reminder, it's nice to change the order here so that the music volume will be first. And to make sure that the volume will be in line with the text, I will also change vertical to shrink center. Okay, way better. We can also go to box container and here in theme overrides also introduce some more separation, maybe even 20. And I will do the same for the remaining options. Because full screen had some weird issues with the margin on the left, I also decided to give it this box container. And yeah, I think now we have nicely aligned main menu. Of course, there is still some settings that we could tweak, but I think it's much better than it was a second ago. Okay, so let's do a final testing. I will play the game. First we'll do a music volume test. It works properly. Then we'll try to change it to full screen. And then let's try out our 3D scale setting. As you can see, when I change this to much lower value, the trees in the background become pixelated. So while I'm still in my native resolution, the 3D objects in the background are rendered in lower quality so that my computer can keep up. Okay, perfect. We now have a fully working main menu for our Godot game. One more reminder to remember to click the link in the comments and join Code GameJam 2nd edition. It will be for sure a lot of fun. We are currently doing theme voting, so if you have some nice idea for a theme of the jam, go ahead and cast your vote. Maybe your theme will be selected. As always, thanks a lot to my awesome patrons that support this channel. See you soon.